Hi, it's James and welcome to the second workshop of zerotojazz.com. Hopefully you've gotten up to a point where you really chromatically master your instrument and you can now comfortably play all 12 major keys and you really understand those. So it's time to take another step towards playing jazz, and this particular workshop is really about understanding jazz as a whole, because there's so many little parts to jazz and there's so many specialty areas that I've noticed if you go online, there's a million different opinions on what is jazz exactly, and it's very hard to sort of, especially as a beginner, I noticed of course myself when I was trying to learn this, it's very hard to ask someone just straight out and say what is jazz and have them give you an answer you can do something with. So you may get something very metaphorical and say, yeah, it's when some people create a space of music where the rules don't apply, or answers like that are cool and I think in many ways can be true, but they don't actually really help you to play jazz. So this video is really trying to answer that question in a practical way. So I give you a tool, a mindset that'll really help you understand the whole thing, the practice of playing jazz as a whole, and then be able to sort of dive into different specialty areas where you feel you need work, where you need to improve. So that's what we're going to do in this video, and for the first part of that we're going to move over to the piano again, where I'll explain some of the basics to you. So let's move over to the piano. Let's talk about jazz. Now the first thing that's I think important to know is that all songs are really comprised out of three elements, which is the melody, which is the thing that most of us tend to remember when we hear a song. Then there's of course the harmony, which is a series of chords usually that supports the melody. So it's the bass player and maybe the pianist who are supporting, so let's say that it's a singer that's doing the melody. And then of course there's the third part, which is the rhythm. So for any song there's always melody, harmony and rhythm. Now I want to give you the metaphor of playing a game of jumping hoops with your parents when you were little. Imagine your parents and maybe a few of their friends walking into the street or maybe a nearby football field with a series of, say, 8 to 10 hula hoops, and you've got 8 to 10 adults there. And they're all standing in a large circle, holding up a hula hoop, each one of the parents. And then you're with a few kids and you have to race from parent to parent, jump through the hoop, and then run on to the next hoop. You probably are familiar with that game, probably played it once or twice when you were little. And I think that's the perfect metaphor for a jazz song. Why? Because the harmony, so the series of chords that are played during a song, are usually circular. So you start at one chord, usually the basic chord, so the key that the song is in, and then you move through a set of different chords and then you come back to the original chord. So it's really like a circular race that you're doing. Now to give you an example of that, I'm going to play the first circle of, let's do I'm All at Sea from Jamie Cullum. Now I'm not a singer obviously, but I'll sing the melody here for you so you can latch on to something. And I'll play just the first circle to give you an idea, what does a circle like that look and sound like. I'm all at sea, where no one can bother me, forgot my roots, if only for a day, just me and my thoughts, sailing far away, like a wandering that seems into Please just leave me just right here on my own. Later on you could spend some time with me if you want to. Oh, let's see. Now obviously I'm not a piano player, so this is actually pretty hard for me, but that's really one circle, and after that it just keeps repeating this exact same thing, and of course he sings something slightly different the second time, and then they go to a bridge, which is really a different bass pattern, but then they go back to this circle again. So the series of hoops of this song, which, you know, again, if I, without singing, if I play it again, oh sorry. And so forth. Those are really the hoops that the melody is trying to navigate. And so the next step for you to really you know, understand jazz better and make another step towards actually playing jazz is to understand these hoops, is to understand harmonic progressions. And that really brings me to why I want to use this metaphor of jumping hoops. Because playing jazz, you know, answering that question, what is jazz practically? Well, practically jazz is the musical equivalent of playing a game of jumping the hoops. You know, in the following way, that you have a circle of hoops which is made from chords, you know, from scales really. And you know, there's a set of different scales in a circular path, and you know, the melody, which is the kid, is running through the different hoops, creating the melody. And of course the form, the jazz form, is that we first always play the original melody as it was you know, envisioned by the composer once, and then we start soloing. So then first usually the soloist takes a turn and runs the chorus a few times, trying to impress people with his musical you know, acrobatics, and playing around the melody and trying different things, you know, making saltos through the hoops, things like that. And then once the solo is done, he either gets, you know, he either takes the hoop from someone else who's, you know, holding up the hoops in the band, and starts supporting someone else, like the pianist who's now taking a solo. Or, you know, if you don't play an instrument that can do that, like me, the saxophone or the trumpet, for example, which are instruments that are not really suited to accompany others, to lay down this harmonic progression, then you're just quiet for a while and you just sit next to the band and wait for the other guys to have their solos and finish. And then once you come to the last round, so to speak, we all play the melody again and finish the song. So that's really a way to look at jazz as a whole, and what is going on when you're looking to a jazz band. They're playing a game of musical hoop jumping. So the next part for you is to really learn to understand how this harmonic progression is the fancy word that we use for these you know, these circles of hoops in the land of jazz. How do these harmonic progressions work? You need to really learn to understand these. How are they made? You know, what are the structures to these things, so you can anticipate, because otherwise you'd be like a kid that can't see where the hoops are, because in order to successfully navigate this path of hoops, obviously you have to be able to see where the next parent with the hoops is. Otherwise you'll just be an idiot, you know, running like a wild chicken in a field. So how do you know musically where the next hoop is, and how do you get from one hoop to the next? That's really what we're going to get into now. So that's the next step for you in learning jazz. Let's get back to the piano and go a step further with this. So we have chromatic mastery now of our instrument. We know the 12 major scales, and now it's time to understand what is called the harmonic progression and how harmonic progressions are built. And a harmonic progression is just a fancy word for a circle of musical hoops. And of course the hoops here are made from chords. So let's take one step back here and go a little bit into what is a chord. Well, a chord is really a set of notes played together. So, you know, you have one note, a unison, and then we have a two note, and then we get the triad, and then we get the seventh chord. And these are different variations, but basically a chord is when there's more than one note playing together, you have a chord. And the most used, the most basic chord in all music is the triad, which is made of the 1, the 3 and the 5 of a scale. So you know all 12 major scales now, because you've learned those in the last workshop. So if we make the C major scale here, and we take the triad of the C major scale, we get the C major chord. It's the basic C major chord. Now we can add what they call a seventh to it, which is, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, to make it sound even more full. So, you know, triad. That's the major, the C major seventh chord, is what we call it there. And that chord is based on the major sequence, on the major structure that you now know. So it's still 2 whole steps, 1 half step, 3 whole steps, 1 half step. But there's more than one structure out there. And that's why it's so important that you learn the major structure really well. Because now, when we go into harmonic progressions, we'll find that not only do harmonic progressions go from one scale to another, so C to G to F to G, but they also go into different structures. Major, major, minor, major, major again. So what's important now is that we're going to, for the first time, change the structure around a bit. Or well, we're not going to do it ourselves, but we're going to understand or learn to understand that not only does a song go through different hoops, and those hoops are usually different chords, those chords are also different in structure. And this is really where you know, some of the difficulty begins. So let's take a very basic, nice sounding harmonic progression like this. Probably familiar to you because I think that was in like a Sport Life commercial or something like that. But what that is a major chord. So that's the first, the third and the fifth of the scale of C. Then I go over to the G. Now the G major scale, just the F sharp, you should know that by now. So if I take the first, the third and the fifth of the G, and then it goes to the G, well, let's go to the F first, so then to the F, which is also major. Oh, sorry. Which has the B flat, of course, in it, which you should know by now. So then we get... Now, to make that more interesting, we want to do this. What happens there when we go? Well, when you hear the type of the sound change, we're going into a different structure. So you can very clearly hear same type of sound, same type of sound. But when we go, all of a sudden it's very clear that there's a different sound going on, that there's a different structure going on. And what that structure is the minor structure. Now, what the minor structure is very, very simple. It's you take the major scale, the major sequence. So let's start at the C here. 2 whole steps, 1 half step, 3 whole steps, 1 half step. And then we lower the third by a half step. So instead of 3 here, we play it there. And we also lower the 7 notes, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, by a half step. And we get this scale. So major, minor. And that's a difference in sound. Because we can also do that with a chord. So we can apply this minor structure to all of the major scales, and we get the... I can do that for the G, I can do it for the F, And you know, this is where it really gets interesting once you realize that, hey, not only is there the 12 major scales, but you can do more with those scales than just play them in major. You can play them in minor, and you can also play them in half diminished and dominant. And there's, you know, there's many more structures out there. And what's going to become important now is that you understand, really for this step, that a harmonic progression is made of a series of chords that the melody tries to navigate, and those chords not only are different, so it starts on C, goes to G, goes to F, goes back to C again. They're always circular, but they go through a path of chords, and those chords are different, but they're also usually going through different structures. So that's a very important second or really third thing to really understand. And why is it so important? Because you probably have noticed that when you were trying to play with the jazz song, that you found the key, that you were playing something and it sounded right, but then all of a sudden the song went, you know, somewhere else, jumped through another hoop, and then all of a sudden your notes were wrong. And that usually happens once the structure changes. So you know, a song will start on C, which means that, you know, all the notes from the C major scale are right, but then all of a sudden it'll go to C minor, or, you know, to F minor, or to G minor, or to some other key, or, you know, to a different structure altogether. And then all of a sudden several of the notes from the C scale are no longer in tune, because for example, once it goes to minor, in your solos also, you know, you can, if you were, then that note all of a sudden sounds false. So when you go, so you have to go and move with these structures as a soloist in order to stay in tune and in order to fit into the song, which is, you know, what I talked about earlier, as in understanding where the song is and what structure the band is playing, so you can stay within that structure. That is why you need to understand this. Okay, so now you might be a little scared right now, thinking, oh my god, there's 12 major scales and you can interpret them all in different ways. Oh my god, there's just so much to learn. Do I really have to know all this stuff? Yes, but it's really not that hard. If you really know your major scales, then you know, all the other structures are really just minor adjustments and tweaks to the major scale. So, you know, for the minor, for example, just lower the third by a half, lower the 7 by a half, and voila, you've got the major, you've changed the major sequence into the minor sequence. Not a lot of thought needed there. So it's really not that hard. But it does take some time to practice these variations, so you can really switch in your mind from, you know, soloing in a C major scale to then switching to, oh, now for this part I have to solo in a C minor scale or in an F minor scale or something like that. Those transitions take a little bit of time, but it's really not that hard with some practice. And that brings us to really the practice for this workshop, for the next period, is that in addition to, of course, still practicing and, you know, keeping the practice of your major scales, I'm going to teach you really two extra structures to apply to these. So you'll play your major scale up and down, but then you'll also play the minor scale and the dominant 7, because those really are two very, very common structures, and they're very similar. Now the minor, I already told you, is just lower the third of the scale by a half and lower the 7th by a half, and the dominant 7 structure, well, the name already is saying it, means lower only the 7th by half a step. So it's really almost the same as the minor structure, just without the lowering of the third. So that's the exercise for the next period here. Now just take maybe 2 weeks. You don't need that much practice with this before we can move on to the next part, is to pick your 12 major scales and just keep practicing them, and also of course keep increasing your chromatic mastery. But in addition to that, now also practice playing your scales in minor and playing your scales as dominant seventh. So you know, just play up and down your scale and then make them into the minor scale and into the major scale. So I'll give you an example of these three different sequences, these three different structures here, just using the C scale. So that would be B flat for anyone who's not playing a B flat instrument like me, but it really doesn't matter because it's the same for all 12 scales, and it's the same sound quality, you know, the minor and the dominant quality. So let's start at the C. Now just the normal major C scale. Now then the dominant seventh, so instead of a B I would play a B flat because I'm lowering the seventh note by a half step. So it would sound like this. And then minor, where we lower both the seventh and the third. So I'll be playing B flat instead of B and E flat instead of E, and it would sound like this. Now the important thing about this is to really get familiar with the sound quality of the different structures. So you need to be able to play them, of course, you need to just get them into your hands, but it's also very important to just recognize what it sounds like, because minor and dominant and major have very distinct types of, you know, emotions or feelings or sort of a general sound to it. And it's good to be able to recognize it and to sort of start to cultivate a feel for that. So that's the exercise for the next, say, 2 weeks. Just play your 12 major scales, but you know, after playing each scale, also play it up and down across the whole range of your instrument in you know, as a dominant seventh scale and as a minor scale. So lowering just the seventh note by half a step for the dominant seventh scale, and for the minor scale lowering the seventh by a half step and the third by a half step. And then finally, I need you to take this metaphor of, you know, jumping musical hoops and go watch some films or some movies of jazz bands playing songs, and listen for this game that's going on. So listen for the jazz form of the band playing one whole round of playing the original melody, and then notice that the soloists are taking rounds. So they're not just playing a random amount of of music. No, they're starting at the beginning of the song, they're playing over the entire song. Sometimes, you know, they'll go around several, so they'll be playing across the whole harmonic structure of the harmonic progression of the song several times, and then they get to the end of the harmonic progression and they pass the solo on to the next person. That will keep going on until the last soloist is done, and then they'll pick up the original melody together again and finish the song. So I've included a few links below the video here with several great examples where it's very visible and where it's very clear to see this game of musical hoops going on. And it's great to take a look at those movies and really for yourself get a grasp on this idea of, okay, I'm playing musical hoops here, how does this work? And to really see what is going on, and to really understand jazz from that perspective. So those are is your assignment for the next 2 weeks. Have fun with that, and I'll see you in the next workshop in 2 weeks. Until then, see you.